Welcome to this EU SME Center webinar about the imported fresh fruit market in China. The EU SME Center is an EU Commission funded project that was established in Beijing in 2010. The center is implemented by 6 chambers of commerce, and the project is in its second phase that will run until July 2018. The center's objective is to prepare EU SMEs to do business in China by providing them with a range of information, advice, training, and support services. You can now read some of the achievements of the EU SME Center. Before we start, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Daniel Pedraza. I came to China in 2012, working for the Andalusian Trade Promotion Agency. After that, I joined a private consulting firm before starting to work for the European Chamber of Commerce in China. Since 2016, I'm the director for China of Vavings, which is a consulting firm specialized in the food and beverage industry. In this webinar, we're going to provide a market overview, followed by an analysis of how the European companies are doing in the Chinese market. After that, we will review what role Hong Kong plays in the market and what are the drivers affecting fruit consumption. We will continue with a quick description of different distribution channels, and last, I'll share some insights on how to find and maintain business partners. So let's just get into it. In this chapter, we're going to review how China compares to the other 4 largest economies in the world, which are the United States, the European Union, India, and Japan. As you can see on the graph, China has experienced a steady growth over the last 15 years. There is now a similar amount of fruit per person in China compared to the European Union or the United States, which are rich regions, and has already left behind other countries such as Japan, which is more or less at the same fruit supply level per capita than 15 years ago, and India, which is growing but at a slower pace. When we translate these figures into total amounts, we can see clearly that China consumes more fruits than any other country or region in the world. These figures that you have on your screen showing that China's fruit supply was over 125 million tons in 2013 are provided by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which doesn't provide any more recent data. But to compare with other countries, this is a good picture of it, even if it's not recent. But the whole point is to illustrate that China's fruit supply is much larger than any other economy in the world. So we have seen that China is a huge market, but what do they consume? Which fruits do Chinese consumers eat? Well, there are 2 sources of fruits. One is domestic produced fruits and the other are imports. So let's get into the fruit production. In 2016, China produced 283 million tons. 28% of this total production were watermelons, and 16% for apples, and 7% for pears. These 3 categories make up for about half of China's fruit production, being the other half mainly citrus, stone fruits, other melons, grapes, and plums and sloes, and other fruits. China eats about 99% of this production. That means that it only exports 1%. In 2017, they exported 3.6 million tons, and most of it, almost all of it, goes to neighboring countries such as Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, or Russia. So what fruits does China import? Well, before going into the numbers and the details, let's explain why China imports in the first place. Same as in any other country, China imports because they cannot produce fruits in that period of the year because they are not in season, or because they cannot produce them at all because they don't have the climate conditions to do so. Therefore, it makes perfect sense that the vast majority of China's fruit imports come from warmer countries in the region, such as Vietnam, for example, that exported 1,164,000 tons in 2017, the Philippines, 867,000 tons, or Thailand, with 648,000 tons. These three countries combined make up for about 60% of total fruit imports in terms of weight, not value, that we will see on the next slide. And that means that the rest of the world exported only 40%. As you can imagine, European Union countries are not top of the list. Actually, there were only 2 countries in the top 20, which were Spain, ranked number 16 with more than 24,000 tons, and Italy at the bottom of the top 20 with 11,000 tons. As you can see on this pie chart, most of the fruits that China imports are tropical fruits, and there are only 2 categories that China imports and also produces in large quantities, which are grapes and citrus fruits. In both cases, they import mostly from the southern hemisphere to have all year round availability. In the case of grapes, some citrus, also some varieties from the northern hemisphere are highly appreciated, so they still have a market for China. Let's take a look at the imports by value. We can see here massive differences. There is a group of fruits that were very important in terms of quantity and are also important, of course, in value, but not that important. For example, other tropical fruits represented 20% of the imports by weight and only 17% by value. This is even worse for the case of bananas, which were 24% of the quantity and only 11% of the value. Coconut, 9% in weight, 3% in value. And there is a group that grows a lot. The most extreme case is cherries, which is only 2% in quantity, but a whopping 15% in value. Most of these cherries come from the States and also Chile. Kiwi fruit, 3% in quantity, 7% in value. Durians, 5% in quantity and double that amount in value. Grapes, same case, 6% in quantity, 12% in value. Of course, the different price is the reason why there are these differences, and also pretty obvious this has an impact on the ranking of top exporters to China. In the top of the list, we find Thailand and Chile, both with more than $1 billion worth of exports in 2017. The first one exports a lot of durian and the second one a lot of cherry. Same case for the third in the rank, which is the United States, with more than 700 million worth of exports. And for the European countries, no big changes. Spain is now on the 17th position of the ranking with more than 38 million US dollars worth of exports. And Italy is again at the bottom of the top 20 with more than 33 million US dollars. In this chapter, we will go briefly through the regulatory requirements that companies need to meet to export fruits to China. We also check which European countries have currently signed up protocols that enables them to export fruit to China. And we will finish with a comparative analysis of the export from the EU compared to other regions in the world. These are the basic requirements that you need to make sure that you meet if you want to export fruits to China. The first one, and probably the most difficult one, is that your country must have signed an export protocol of a specific fruit or family of fruits with AQSAQ, the Chinese competent authority in charge of signing the export protocols with foreign countries. The process of signing a new protocol is usually quite long. It may take up a few years even. It works the following way. The exporting country submits an official application to AQSAQ along with a set of technical documents, and after the assessment by AQSAQ and the negotiation, it will be signed at a ministerial level visit from the exporting country into China, and after this the protocol will be in place. But we will need to go to step 2, which is that AQSAQ will visit the orchards to ensure that the protocol has been implemented and that the orchards meet with the requirements set on this protocol. After your orchard has been approved and information has been published by AQSAQ in their website, you will be good to export to China. Of course, you still need to meet with all the other standard export requirements, such as the cold treatment and quarantine, the labeling. You need to prepare the set of export documents. And for some of these requirements, such as the cold treatment time and temperature, you will need to refer to your export protocol. And for some others, you will need to check Chinese food standards. At this point, you may wonder, is there something I can do to have my country signing a protocol with China for my fruits? Well, there actually is. Maybe not a big thing, but you can definitely start to work with your industry association to lobby your Ministry of Agriculture or the competent authority in your country to negotiate the protocols with the QSAQ to put your fruits into the timeline of signing new protocols. What protocols are currently in place in the European Union as of February 2018? There are 8 countries with protocols in place to export a total number of 9 different fruits. Spain is the country with the highest number, 6, 4 citrus and 2 stone fruits. And on the opposite side, we would have Belgium, Greece, the Netherlands and Poland with 1 fruit each. But how much are we actually exporting? We have seen some numbers at the beginning of this webinar, the market overview highlighting those exports from Spain and Italy, which are the 2 top exporters from the EU. But here we have focused the analysis on the 9 different fruits that can be exported from some EU countries into China. We have also made a division among the 3 different groups of countries that are the European Union countries, those countries in the Northern Hemisphere, excluding the EU, and countries that are in the Southern Hemisphere, but also along the equator, that are included on the 3rd group. We can see that the majority of China's imports of these products come from countries not in the Northern Hemisphere, maybe with the exception of the orange, but with the orange, this is a very particular case because China's production usually finish around January or February, and then we still have countries such as Spain that can export from March to May, and that window is where most of the exports happen. It's pretty clear that the European producers should be competing with those countries in the Northern Hemisphere because they're selling the fruit at the same time that the European producers. We still have a lot of room for improvement since only 1 out of 4 US dollars worth of China's imports come from the European Union. A lot of the protocols have been recently signed, so we can expect a better performance in the coming years. Companies are often confused by the role that Hong Kong plays in the Chinese market. We have to say that Hong Kong has a completely different customs authority, and the regulations, such as the need for an export protocol that apply to mainland China, do not apply for Hong Kong. You don't need an export protocol to export to Hong Kong. Therefore, it's easier to access, but also is a much smaller market than mainland China. However, it's an excellent promotional platform for Asia. For example, every year, Asia Fruit Logistica, the best trade show in the region, is organized in Hong Kong, and also because it's a re-export hub to South China. While in the past this may happen because of the existence of this great channel that made possible the entry in China of fruits without a protocol, in current times this is mainly because Hong Kong is used as an alternative entry route for fruits when Chinese ports are especially busy. For example, in January, before Chinese New Year, when Chinese ports receive the largest amount of fruits in the year, they get especially busy. They take more than 3 or 4 times what they usually take, which is 1 to 4 days to clear customs. So what importers do is they send the products to Hong Kong, and then from there they clear customs using the Hong Kong entry route, which at that time is faster than using the Chinese ports, giving them a few days advantage compared to sending those to Shanghai or Shenzhen. When it comes to reporting imports, China does not take into account that they have been going through Hong Kong, but they reported as imports from the country of origin of the fruits. But Hong Kong does report the number of fruits that they get into Hong Kong and then they get re-exported into mainland China. In 2016, they reported more than 1.5 billion US dollars, which is a lot if we take into consideration that in 2017 China reported total imports for a value of 5.3 billion. So that's a very important amount that we need to take into consideration when measuring the role that Hong Kong plays for the Chinese market. Let's analyze now the different drivers of fruit consumption in China. We have identified 7 different drivers. First one, appearance. Second, flavor. Third, price. Fourth, country of origin. Fifth, packaging. Sixth, variety. And seventh, the season. Appearance is one of the most important features, if not the most. If you send any shipment with any of these defects, you will certainly have a very hard time trying to sell to that importer again. Spots, decoloration, bad shape, small size, product that is not homogeneous within the same shipment, all this will make you very difficult to sell to the same importer again. This is because imported fruits are considered premium and they sell at a higher price, so importers expect to buy from you the very best product that your orchard produces. And that's the exact same reason why imported fruits must be very tasty, because Chinese consumers pay a premium to eat a good-looking, tasty fruit. Domestic fruits, however, are often sold quite before they ripe. This is linked to the previous point because in a lot of cases the fruits are sold when they look the best, whether they are ripe or not. So at some point, especially some fruits, require certain time at home before they can be consumed with a good flavor. As a consequence of points 1 and 2, Chinese consumers pay a premium for imported fruits. This is a reality of the market. Fruit produced in the EU is sold 2 to 3 times more expensive in retail in China than what you can buy them at home at any local supermarket. This higher price is partly because of the actual cost of transporting the fruits from the EU into China, but also because of the higher margins, because of the higher risk that the Chinese players have compared to their European counterparts. When the European fruits arrive into the Chinese ports, they have been in transit for about 30 days, so everyone in China has much less time to sell the fruits to the consumer. so they have a higher risk and therefore a higher margin. For the domestic produce, this relationship between appearance, flavor, and price remains the same, but there are many different combinations depending on the market segment that the retailer is targeting. We have established that imported fruits are considered premium, so it makes sense that the country of origin or the fact that the fruits are imported is a major selling point when it comes to advertise your fruits. There are not massive differences among countries, especially at the consumer level. Maybe at the importer level is different because they understand and know their products better. But at the consumers, they don't make a huge difference as long as the product is imported. This is the case for most countries and fruits, but there are some exceptions. A few of these countries and companies have invested a considerable amount of money into developing their country as a recognizable origin for the Chinese consumer. They have done this partnering up with e-commerce platforms and traditional retailers in order to launch seasonal campaigns about the advantages of their fruits. This tactic has worked well for many of them, but probably the best example is the kiwi fruit from New Zealand, led by its export monopoly, Sainsbury. This company is by far the most recognizable fruit company in China, and this translates into more than $300 million of kiwi fruit imports from New Zealand. Other examples include the cherries from Chile and the States, or the avocados from Mexico. When exporters actually get Chinese clients, one of the issues they need to agree on is how to ship the fruits. In most cases, standard cardboard boxes will be the agreed packaging, although that is far from what the consumers can find on the shelves. This is because when the fruits arrive in China, they will be repackaged with different levels of sophistication. The excessive use of plastic is one of the most noticeable characteristics of fruit packaging in this country, even for fruits that do not require any sort of plastic wrapping at all. It is also a common sight to see fruits wrapped in an individual foam net and a plastic wrap. This, in part, is made to make the fruits shinier than if they wouldn't use the plastic wrapping. Packing fruits as a gift is also an everyday sight at any local shop or even online, especially before Chinese New Year, when a lot of fruit baskets are given out in China. We will be reviewing this in a couple of slides. When it comes to displaying the fruits, there are of course many different options, but the most common are the following. First, displaying the fruit with no packaging, like in the West, or with either an individual foam net, a plastic wrap, or a combination of both. Then customers take a plastic bag, put the fruits in it, and the bag is weighted, usually by the shop clerk. This is the same as we do in the West. It is also very common to see a few units wrapped all together, already weighted and priced accordingly. And for smaller fruits, same logic behind that, but instead of using a plastic wrap, using a plastic box. We have mentioned this throughout the webinar, but we need to stress the importance and the opportunity that Fruit as a Gift offer for foreign producers. This is usually neglected by European producers. Here we can see a couple of foreign examples that are Sunkist and Sainsbury again. These are probably the two best performers in the country, and they are adapting their boxes into a more gift-friendly packaging. Also platforms, fruit shops, and basically any other retailer provides the opportunity for clients to buy fruit packaging that looks like a gift, so they can give it to relatives, especially before Chinese New Year. When it comes to varieties, we need to make a distinction between consumers and professionals. Consumers do not generally know which variety they are buying. All they can see at the retailer level, where they buy the fruits, is whether the fruit is imported or not and which country, but that's it. Variety is rarely seen displayed on the label or in any other sort of advertisement, and even if it is, the consumers do not know the differences between the different varieties. This makes perfect sense because there are a lot of different fruits sold from many different countries in China, so it would be almost impossible for an average consumer to keep track of everything that is being sold in the country. Professionals, however, do know the difference between the different varieties in different countries. Maybe when a protocol is signed and this country can export different varieties that are new to them, they still need some time to understand them. But generally speaking, they are quite knowledgeable about the differences and they will choose one over the other. When we analyzed the fruit exports from the EU to China at the beginning of this webinar, we saw that the vast majority of China's imports come from the southern hemisphere. This makes perfect sense because, well, China produces a lot of fruit, but they still want to have almost all year round availability of certain fruits. The low end of the market will source always domestic seasonal fruits, cheaper products, but for upscale retailers and e-commerce platforms, they want to have product that is different and difficult to find otherwise. So they will buy imported products that are in season somewhere else in the world. This certainly makes more difficult for EU producers to find an opportunity in the market, but it's certainly not impossible. We have seen how Spanish orange producers sell their produce between March and May after Chinese domestic production is over. Both are still on the northern hemisphere, but the different varieties allow the Spanish producers to sell after Chinese production is over, and they are performing quite well recently. EU producers can also differentiate their products, providing a higher perceived quality because of the inherent characteristic of the fruits, but also by investing in developing their country brand or the specific brand for that specific fruit. Talking about seasonality, we definitely need to address the Chinese New Year issue. You can see on your screen China imports of fruits and nuts between January 2015 and December 2017, and it's evident that there is a peak in imports every single January. This is based on two main sources of demand. One is the general consumption that is more or less stable, but the special one is the fruit as a gift effect that we have explained before, but here we can quantify and see graphically how important it is. It's in this time of the year when you need to be especially close to your importer because there are many potential issues that can be avoided by a good coordination between the exporter and the importer. For example, you may need to send the fruits earlier than usual to make sure that you have time enough to clear customs and distribute the fruits to their final destination. Chinese ports get very busy in this time of the year, so you need to work with your importer the best way to ensure that your products will arrive to their destination in time. This festival falls in different weeks of the year, so you need to make sure with your importer when it's going to happen next and when you should ship the fruits and to which port. Let's take now a brief look into the different consumer profiles. We have split the consumers into two different categories, rural and urban. This last one has been also reclassified according to their income and a special category that is the senior citizens. Urban consumers have easy access to imported fruits. It's very likely that any retailer they visit will sell imported fruits, and these fruits may get there following a proper cold chain, which is unthinkable for rural consumers. Among urban consumers, those with a higher income are potential buyers for the whole season. They're after good-looking, tasty fruits, and the price is not a problem for them. They buy in e-commerce platforms and also some upscale markets. The middle income profile behaves in a similar way to the higher income consumers, but they are more price sensitive, meaning that they will not buy as frequently, or they may not buy the most expensive fruits available in the market. They will check different options, especially in e-commerce platforms, but they can also buy at traditional shops. Low-income consumers will buy local seasonal fruits, rarely imported fruits, especially not those that China can produce, such as apple or oranges. Then we have senior citizens that will buy according to their income level, but they will not buy from e-commerce platforms. In this chapter, we're going to review the different distribution channels in China. Wholesale markets are the places where the imported fruits go after cleared customs. There are three main markets in China: Jiangnan in Guangzhou City, Huichan in Shanghai, and Xinfadi in Beijing. But the most important one is the one in Guangzhou, followed by the one in Shanghai. Beijing one is much smaller than the previous two. Trucks coming from the ports unload the cargo in these places, so fruits are traded daily here. Basically, every single fruit shop or wet market in the region will source from these places that have been used for as a center of operations for many importers that have an office around here, and they control the products coming in but also coming out. And this is the place where you need to go and inspect if you want to check what happens with your fruits when they arrive in China. There are facilities to keep the fruits in cold storage, so up until here it's still possible to preserve the cold chain in the distribution system. Wet markets operate daily. Vendors there source from wholesale markets, as we have explained in the previous slide. The majority of the fruits are domestic fruits, but in Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, it's very likely to find a significant percentage of imported fruits. Prices in wet markets can increase considerably compared to wholesale markets, mainly because of the profit the vendor needs to make, but also because of the risk they assume by buying the fruit, and they later may not be able to sell it in time before the fruit is spoiled, or they need to sell it at a discount because it will get bad. Also, weather conditions affect the prices that you can see in wet markets. When there are rainy days or snowy days, fruits will be more expensive because it's more difficult to get them to the wet markets, and also because then it's also more difficult to sell them. There isn't cold storage in these markets, and the van or truck that brings the fruits into these markets is not refrigerated. That means that the cold chain stops either at the wholesale market or after unloading the container at the ports. Supermarkets and hypermarkets have not traditionally had a strong fresh product department, but that's changing quickly. This is because there has been some changes in consumption patterns among Chinese consumers that are now looking for more convenience and healthier products, but also because of the decline in the number of local fruit shops in Tier 1 cities. There was almost one fruit shop in every corner offering a very limited amount of fruit options, and now, due to the increase in rent prices and the already mentioned sophistication in fruit consumption, that's not the case anymore. This segment is investing a lot in developing the cold chain. It's still not prevalent, but it's improving greatly and very quickly. Most of the supermarkets and hypermarkets will source their imported fruits from wholesale markets or from companies located in these wholesale markets, even if the fruits never make it to the market itself. Convenience stores are growing a lot. It's a distribution channel that is performing very well, but when it comes to fruits, it's still very underdeveloped. There is very limited presence of fruits that is mostly cut and mixed in a bowl, ready for immediate consumption, as you can see in the picture. As we have already explained before, traditional fruit shops and corners are increasing in number, and this opportunity has been taken up by the expanding fresh departments in supermarkets, but also by fruit chains that base their success in a better, more diverse fruit offer and a more professional management. Pagoda is a prime example among fruit chains. It currently owns more than 2,500 stores in the country, and 30% of their sales are directly procured from 22 different countries. By 2020, they plan to double up that percentage and also to have more than 10,000 stores in operation. These stores do not usually have cold storage, so cold chain stops either at the wholesale market or after the containers are unloaded at the ports. If fruit chains are growing rapidly, fruit sales at e-commerce platforms are growing even faster. Imported fruits are the best-selling category for most of these fresh platforms, and some of them are reporting even 3 figures growth rates, which is crazy. Fruits are not sold cheaper online than in brick-and-mortar stores. On the contrary, in a lot of cases, it's even more expensive, and this is due mainly to the cost of delivering a fragile, refrigerated product for a relatively low value. E-commerce platforms have invested hefty sums into developing a reliable cold chain that includes refrigerated last-mile delivery. They buy from importers in most cases, but some of them are starting to procure directly some hero products. Fruits are consumed in a small volume in food service, mainly given out for free before the dishes arrive, and also as a fruit salad for dessert. And in any case, it's almost always domestic seasonal fruits. We will wrap up this webinar sharing a few insights on how to find and maintain partners and how to develop a healthy, successful relationship with them. First thing we need to understand is that Chinese importers are very active looking for new products. They need a way to differentiate themselves from their competitors, so when a new country signs a new protocol, they will be approaching proactively these exporters, and they will try and see how the fruit performs in the market, both in terms of the shipment, how the fruits arrive in China, and also how the market likes it. So first year is usually a trial and error period, and after that they can measure the potential success of that specific fruit from that specific country. There are many players in the market with different strategies, which it makes easier to find a client to access the market, but it also makes more difficult to be successful. Finding a client is usually not enough to be successful. You will be managing different importers that will have different interests, and this is more complex than for other markets. You need to be clear that your success in the market depends a great deal on the relationships that you have with your importers. And these relationships are strengthened or weakened because of the way you work. If you're professional and committed to the Chinese market, then you will certainly will be successful. And if you're not, if you consider China as a third foreign market, that you send fruits when you have some demand, but that's it, you don't have a strategy, then it's very likely that you will not succeed after the demand falls a little and there is no more space for weaker companies. One way to gain a solid competitive advantage is to understand and adapt to the Chinese market. It is also important to visit frequently and to keep close contact of your current and your potential importers. This is the way to build relationships that, as we have said, it's extremely important and it's essential to be successful. You also need to care about how your fruit arrives in China and what happens when it does. It would be a great idea that with some of your cargo arriving in China, you make a visit and you go to the port and you go to the wholesale markets and see and understand the process by yourself. So we have come to the conclusion of this USME Center webinar on the fresh fruit market in China. Please stay tuned. Feel free to drop your questions at the USME Center website, www.usmecenter.org.cn. Thank you.